Ambassador Cui, welcome to our program.
Thank you. It's so nice to talk to you again.
It's great to have you, Mr. Ambassador. Let me know about what do you think about the depths of interactions between the two presidents. There's a summit and later followed up by a phone call.
I think, first of all, the most important outcome of this presidential meeting in Florida last week was the establishment of very good working relationship between our two heads of state. And under their guidance, we kicked off two of the four major dialogue mechanisms. One is the diplomatic and security dialogue. The other is comprehensive economic dialogue. For the diplomatic and security dialogue, we are not only talking about regional or international issues like the Korean Peninsula or Middle East, but first and foremost, we will have to stress some of the bilateral, fundamental issues in the bilateral relationship. We have to maintain and safeguard the political foundation of this bilateral relationship. So people will have to talk about the Taiwan issue and other issues related to China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. That will lay down a good basis for our discussion on other issues. Of course, Korean Peninsula would be one of the most pressing issues for this dialogue, and there's a very good exchange of views between the two presidents and between the two teams in Mar-a-Lago. And for the economic dialogue, it's called comprehensive economic dialogue. It means we have to look at the economic relation in its totality. Both the progress we have achieved, the upside and the downside, the problems we are still faced with, and the issues we have to address, but in a very constructive manner.
Let's focus on the Korean Peninsula issue. At this point, you see the U.S. strike group is already approaching the Korean Peninsula. Meanwhile, there are media reports suggesting that DPRK is likely to do another test. What sort, we do not know at this point. So, Mr. Ambassador, as the Chinese ambassador to the United States, an important mediator in between these two countries, what do you think about the nature of this crisis right now? Is it an imminent crisis from your perspective?
I think on the Korean Peninsula, our top priority is China's own national security interests, which is very much in line with the overall security interests of the region. That's why we stand for denuclearization, we stand for peace and stability, and we advocate a diplomatic approach to the issue. And we are against any attempt, any action by anybody that will escalate the tension there.
Mr. Ambassador, we did notice during the phone call recently between the Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump, Chinese President did use the means to solve the Korean Peninsula issue. He said peaceful rather than earlier saying diplomatic or through dialogue. Does that word choice in any way means any shift or direction of China's policy toward the Korean Peninsula issue?
I think a dialogue is one of the main forms of peaceful means or diplomatic means.
As simple as that.
I don't think there's any change, any major change in China's policy. But of course, we are increasingly concerned about the situation there.
But people are asking the question because right after the summit between President Xi and President Trump, U.S. has sent its USS Carl Vinson to the area that might be a crisis about the Korean Peninsula issue. So people asking whether China has already given a nod to the United States in that regard to let the U.S. do whatever it wants to do, at least to the extent it is doing now.
Well, I think part of the outcome of this presidential meeting in Mar-a-Lago was a much better mutual understanding of each other's concerns and positions on the Korean Peninsula. So I think for the American side, there is a better understanding of China's concern and position. And we have all along followed the same approach. We stand for denuclearization, we stand for peace and stability, and we stand for diplomatic solution or peaceful means or dialogue and negotiation.
That includes a threat militarily toward the DPRK from the United States. Is that part of the so-called peaceful solution?
Well, I think a peaceful solution has a very clear definition. Anything that's not so peaceful, we are against.
I see. Mr. Ambassador, we have seen also the so-called 100-day plan that is likely to be worked out by the two countries. Some say it's an ultimatum the U.S. has toward China. Others say it is a window opportunity for the two sides to work together. Exactly to you, what is it?
Actually, this 100-day proposal was from the Chinese side. The Chinese side was the first to propose this 100-day proposal. And the intention was quite clear. It was a good indication of our commitment to developing a healthy and stronger economic relationship between the two countries. And we understand the U.S. concerns, and we hopefully they also understand our concerns. So it will serve the mutual interest if we can work out some so-called early harvest to show to the people of both countries that we are working on the issues, we are making progress. I think that's the intention behind this 100-day proposal.
Mr. Ambassador, what kind?
It will take joint efforts by both sides to achieve the goal.
Mr. Ambassador,
whether
exactly.
Whether it's 100 days or 1 year or 2 years. Yeah, please.
Yes. What kind of early harvest are you thinking about at this point?
Well, there are so many areas we can expand our cooperation. We are ready to address the trade issues, investment issues, and there's ongoing work. Maybe it's been suspended for the last couple of months, but there's ongoing discussion between the two sides on the bilateral investment treaty. We should and we can certainly continue. And there are issues that are relatively easier, issues that are relatively harder, and maybe we could try to get some outcome on the easy issues while making continued efforts on the harder issues. There are a lot of things that we can do together.
Easy issues meaning, Mr. Ambassador, BIT, Bilateral Investment Treaty, or Bilateral Infrastructure Investment Treaty. Are those two things in your mind, Mr. Ambassador? I want to get specifics.
In a sense, nothing between China and the United States could be said as easy. But in comparative terms, there are things that we already have a good basis for making further progress, and we should certainly proceed. And there are things that would require redoubled efforts from both sides, and we should do that.
Mr. Ambassador, I'm sure you have noticed before anybody else that President Trump both tweeted and also in an interview with Wall Street Journal suggested from his perspective, China is not a currency manipulator. But of course, Mr. Ambassador, we understand it's the Treasury Department that's likely to come up with the ways to measure or not a country is or not a currency manipulator. So do you think Mr. Trump's words will be taken seriously by the Treasury Department? What does that mean when he tweets that and also said it to the press?
I don't want to comment on whether American government department will take the words of the president seriously or not. This is not for me to comment. But I think that the fact is China is not a currency manipulator. This is quite clear. This is clear to the world.
Mr. Trump, Mr. Ambassador, was saying on Fox News that he had very good chemistry with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. He also suggested some of the details. He said during the first day, there was only 10 minutes so-called free time interaction between him and the Chinese president. But eventually, it turned out to be 3 hours. Second day, also 10 minutes, eventually turned out to be 2 hours. The two talk and talk and talk. The chemistry was really good. Was that true?
Well, I think we are all very grateful to President Trump, the First Lady, and the family for being a wonderful and a very warm host to us. And President Xi and Madame Peng enjoyed the conversation with President Trump and Mrs. Trump. And I think that especially between the two presidents, they started a very good relationship on the basis of much better mutual understanding. They got to know each other quite well, and they had very lengthy conversation, not only on the bilateral relations, but also on international issues of common concern. And of course, they came away with a much better understanding of each other's thinking and personal experience and of the what is happening in the other country. And they also talked about past history and what we would expect from their own country in the future. So I think it's a very good conversation. No wonder it lasted longer than planned.
Is it really like 10 minutes and 3 hours difference? That much?
I think altogether in Mar-a-Lago, they spent over 7 hours together. But part of this time is with the working team. But I think maybe for over half of this time, it's just between the two of them, with two interpreters, of course.
China-U.S. relations, some say, in this dramatically changing time, has entered into a totally new stage. Do you believe that is true? In that way, what does that mean for your job as the Chinese ambassador to the United States?
I think there is, on the one hand, a strong continuity. You see, it's now 45 years since President Nixon's first visit to China. And in the last 45 years, we have worked with the American administration one after another to manage this relationship, to make sufficient progress and lay down a very solid foundation for the future. And now we are turning a new page. Maybe we are starting a new phase of this relationship. And this first meeting between the two presidents at Mar-a-Lago gave us a clear guidance and set a very positive tone.
Mr. Ambassador, many are amazed at the way that China is being sophisticated in dealing with the United States, particularly at the very beginning of this administration. They praise China's patience at the very early stage when there are words that might not be favored by China coming from the administration. They also wonder what really happened during this process, preparing for the summit. Eventually, it turned out with so many achievements. Mr. Ambassador, from your perspective, what do you think is the key now to the bilateral relations when you are doing your diplomatic work?
I think we Chinese, we are very well known in the world for our patience. That should not be surprising to anybody. But in the whole process, in the last few months, we always keep the big goal in mind, which is China and the United States have to develop a cooperative and a constructive relationship with each other. This will serve our common interest, and this is also our shared responsibility to the global community. We always keep this in mind. This is our goal, and we will never allow any single issue or whatever happens to hijack the bilateral agenda or to derail the overall relationship.
Persistence.
I think this persistence and consistency played a great role.
Beautifully said. Chinese Ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Cui Tiankai, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure.